האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We have the zechus, the merit to be starting the Torah from the beginning with the Zera Shimshon and Parshas Bereishit, which is a very exciting moment for all of us. We're going to take a look at a pasuk. First, I should say that we are in Os Vav, section 6, in the Zera Shimshon, in his commentary on Parshas Bereishit. And we're going to take a look at a pasuk, and then we'll get right in. So this is Perek Aleph of Sefer Bereishit, pasuk Tes Zayin. And the pasuk says, Vayas Elokim eshnei hamaoros hagedolim. And God made the two luminaries, es hamaor hagodol lemimsheles hayom. He made the large luminary to rule during the day, the es hamaor hakoton lemimsheles halayla, and he made the small luminary to rule during the night, the Eis HaKochavim, and the stars, meaning and the stars would also join the moon, join the small luminary, the Ma'or HaKaton, at night. So that's the pasuk that the Zera Shimshon is going to discuss with us, and let's get right in. Zera Shimshon says, Medrash Rabbah, in the Medrash Rabbah, and there's a little typographical error here you can correct, it says that the Medrash Rabbah comes from Bereishit Perek Vav, section 5. Hey, it's actually section Gimel. So if you change that hey to a Gimel, you'll correct a little typo. Medrash Rabbah, in the Medrash Rabbah, al pasuk, on the pasuk, as hamaor hagadol lemimsheles hayom v'chulei, that says the large luminary will rule during the day. That, of course, is the pasuk that we just read. So the Medrash comments, Esav monat lachama shehi gedola. Esav, who was, of course, considered the older of the two twins, Esav and Yaakov, Esav came out first, so he was the Godol, he was the older son, and he counts according to the sun, which is the larger of the luminaries. So we have the sun, S-O-N, the older son, who uses the S-U-N, the sun, which is the larger luminary, to count. What does it mean to count? It means he bases his yearly calendar. Esav, the non-Jewish world, bases its yearly calendar on the sun. And to keep things simple, even though this is a complicated topic, we would say this means that a year for the non-Jewish world is the time it takes the earth to do a complete orbit of the sun. That's actually called a sidereal year, and the solar year is a little bit different, and actually the time's different, but that gets us off into complications that we really don't need to do. So let's go back to the Medrash. Esav mona lechama shehi gedola. Esav uses the sun to count his year because, and that is the biggest of the two luminaries. Mahachama hazu sholetis bayom. Ve'ena sholetis balayla. Just like the sun rules during the day, but it has no dominion and no function at night, kach Esav yesh lo chelek ba'olam hazeh, ve'en lo chelek la'olam haba. So to Esav, who uses the sun, the Chama, for his calendar, he has a portion in this world, in Olam Hazeh, but no portion ba'olam haba, no portion in the next world. The Medrash continues, Yaakov hu moneh lelavona shehi katana. Yaakov Avinu, he counts his year with the moon, meaning he has a lunar calendar, which is the smaller of the two luminaries. And the Medrash continues, Ma halavona hazu sholetis bayom uvalayla. Just like the moon has power during the day and the night, meaning that the moon can be seen during the day sometimes. It can appear in the sky, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to see it. If you look carefully, you'll see the moon out during the day. That can happen. And of course, it's out at night as well. Kach Yaakov yesh lo chelek ba'olam hazeh, so too Yaakov has a portion in this world, uba olam haba, and in the next world, ad kan lishono, until here is the language of the Medrash Rabbah. So the Medrash Rabbah, on its most basic level, appears to be teaching us a comparison, an analogy, that Esav can be compared to the sun, and Esav, in fact, embraces this comparison and uses the sun to base his calendar. And how can Esav be compared to the sun? Medrash Rabbah says because he only has a portion in this world, not in the next world, just like the sun only is visible during the day, but is not visible at all to us at nighttime. Yaakov Avinu, on the other hand, is compared to the moon and uses a lunar calendar based on 12 times that the moon goes through all of its phases. And each time the moon goes through all of its phases, it takes either 29 or 30 days, right in between that area, 29 and a half days. And those are the months. And once 12 of those months have passed, that's a year for the Jewish people in the Jewish calendar. Of course, we know that sometimes we have to add a month, but that's, again, would get us off on a tangent in order to correlate certain things that we need to keep in their seasons. But that's the basic point of the Medrash Rabbah. So the Zera Shimshon comments, Makshim HaKadmonim, the early commentators asked a question. De'im kain, if so, yesh lahochiach mikan, then if this Medrash Rabbah is accurate, we can prove from here Dischar mitzvos b'hai alma ika, that there is a reward, that people receive a reward for doing their mitzvos in this world. Now, before we explain how that's connected to the Medrash, let's first discuss that topic, because this is a very well-known and fundamental machlokas, an argument in Shas, in the Gemara and the Talmud. And the machlokas is, one school of thought says that when people do mitzvos, of course they should anticipate and look forward to their main reward, their main schar, being ba'olam haba, being in the next world. However, they also receive reward in this world for the performance of mitzvot. That school of thought is the one that the Zera Shimshon just quoted, which is schar mitzvos b'hai alma ika. There is a reward for mitzvos in this world. That's one school of thought. The counter opinion, the other school of thought, says, no, schar mitzvos b'hai alma leka. There is no reward for mitzvos in this world. And according to that school of thought, when we do mitzvos, we will be rewarded in the next world. But we will not receive rewards in this world based on the mitzvos that we perform. By doing mitzvos, it may make our lives much more meaningful. It may make our lives much more spiritual. It may make our lives, we may bond with other Jews and our family and other people who do mitzvos. There are lots of good things that can be a result of doing mitzvos. But according to this school of thought, Hashem is saving our schar for us for the next world for our mitzvos, and is not giving us reward in this world for those mitzvos. So the Zera Shimshon says it would appear from this piece in the Medrash Rabbah that we just read that we can bring a support, we can bring a proof, so to speak, for one of the two schools of thought. What is the proof that we can bring? Well, the Medrash said that Yaakov Avinu is compared to the moon, which can appear during the day and, of course, at night as well. And this means that Yaakov Avinu, who represents the Jewish people, Bnei Yisrael, have a chelek ba'olam hazeh, a portion in this world and a portion in the world to come. But when we talk about a portion in the world to come, of course, we mean we will be rewarded for our mitzvahs in the world to come. So it seems to be saying we'll be rewarded in the next world and ba'olam hazeh, and in this world, which would support the first school of thought that says there is reward in this world for doing mitzvahs. So the reason this is put in the form of a question, the Zera Shimshon said, Makshim HaKadmonim, the early commentators asked this as a question, is because when that argument is discussed, this idea of Yaakov and Esav and being compared, Esav to the sun and Yaakov to the moon, and reward in this world and the next world for Yaakov, and only reward and only this world for Esav, but no schar in Olam Haba in the next world. that's not brought as a proof to either of the two sides. So it would seem that somehow this discussion in the Medrash Rabbah, this narrative in the Medrash Rabbah, is not connected to the argument. However, it would seem like you could bring a proof to the argument about reward in this world. So that's why it's a question. So again, just to frame that question, how come this piece in the Medrash Rabbah seems to imply clearly that there is a reward for the Jewish people for doing mitzvos in this world, but it is never brought as a support to when that argument is discussed in the Gemara. That's how we can explain the question or understand the question. So let's continue. Uledidon lo kasha klal. According to our approach, the Zera Shimshon says, and he's speaking in humility because he means his approach. In his approach, he says there's no question, no problem. She'af al pi shehalavana sholetis bayom. Even though it's true that the moon can be seen during the day and it has a role to play during the day, mikol makom eina me'ira klal. Nonetheless, we can't really say that it shines, that it illuminates the world during the day. Dishraga betihara lemai mahanya. This is a quote from a Gemara that says, a torch in the middle of the day, how would that help anyone? What do you need it for? Meaning, yes, it's true that we can look up sometimes and see the moon in the sky during the day, but it's not illuminating, it's not providing any light, it's not doing anything for anyone, it's not beneficial to anyone. It would be just like the Zera Shimshon says, carrying around a torch or a flashlight in the middle of the day and acting as if you're using it. Well, that's absurd. Of course, you don't need a flashlight or a candle or a torch in the middle of the day. And if you had one, it wouldn't do anything for you because the sun is illuminating everything. So too, the moon doesn't really, even though it might appear and be visible, the moon doesn't do anything or provide any needed illumination during the day. Uvein bayom, uvein balayla, hi katana mehachama. And whether or not you're talking about during the day or at night, when the moon is really comes to the fore at night, it does provide illumination. Nonetheless, it is always smaller than the sun. Ella shehalavona nires af bayom. But the difference between the moon and the sun in this aspect is that the moon, as we said, can appear during the day. V'hachama eino nires klal balayla, and the sun does not appear at all at night. By definition, if it's nighttime in a certain location, there's no sunlight. The sun sets completely, the stars come out, it's nighttime, and there's no appearance, at least in that area of the world, of the sun. Other places in the world, of course, are illuminated, but in that area, when it's nighttime, there's no appearance whatsoever and no visibility of the sun. V'chein Yisrael, and so too with the Jewish people, afilo hatzadikim eno meirim ba'olam hazeh. Even the most righteous Jewish people do not shine, so to speak, in this world, be'or ha'olam haba, with the spiritual light that they will have in the next world. Dischar mitzvos b'hai alma leka. Because the other school of thought will say there is no reward in this world for the performance of mitzvos, and therefore in this world you will not see even the most righteous person receive sechar, receive a spiritual light from Hashem in this world. Ella but shehem nikarim bein ha'umos ba'olam hazeh. But Jewish people and righteous Jewish people are visible amongst the non-Jews in this world. Afal pi shehem ketanim, dalim, ushefelim. Even though they are small, and even though they are sometimes poor and low and humbled, even so they are visible in this world. They do make a difference. Kidduchsiv, as a pasuk in Tehillim says, Vayitein osam lerachamim lifnei kol shovehem. That means Hashem has given us a merciful place amongst the captors, amongst our captors in this world, in the world. Meaning that even when Jews have been sent into exile into non-Jewish nations, or when Jews have been taken prisoner by invading armies or captives are captives of other nations. Nonetheless, even though that's their situation and they're living in such distress, nonetheless, Hashem has given them rachmim, has given them mercy, so that their captors feel a sense of compassion towards them. Obviously, not always. We've had very ruthless and merciless persecutors throughout Jewish history. However, we also have had nations, countries, peoples, individuals who have shown great kindness and mercy during our exile. Shebechol makom shehem holchim, everywhere that Jewish people go, nasim sarim la'adonehem, they are turned into officers for their masters. That means that Jews might be exiled and might start off in certain countries in the lowest possible position, but as time passes, and often as not, it doesn't even take too much time, Jews are elevated to positions of authority where they're treated nicely, where they're taken care of, and where they're able to not only survive, but to thrive. I'm reading Perek Yud Aleph to Sanhedrin, as the Gemara says in the 11th parak of Maseches Sanhedrin, where that line actually comes from, where it says that Jews are turned into officers to their masters in different situations in different places around the world when they're in exile. Shemuchach mizeh, that it proves from here, sheyesh lahem heker af ba'olam hazeh. This means that Jews do have distinction. They are visible in this world. Even when Jews are in the worst, seemingly apparent worst condition they could be in this world, are they're most distant and most exiled from their homeland, nonetheless, they're visible, just like the moon is visible during the day. Ve'od shetfilas hatzadikim nishmas. And there's another piece of this idea that the Jewish people, like the moon, can appear during the day, that they have a special quality during the day, which means, in this Medrash Rabbah, which means ba'olam hazeh, in this world, that the prayers of the righteous are heard by Hashem. V'zehu ha'hevdel v'ha'hefresh sheyesh beinenu uvein ha'umos. And this is the difference and the distinction, the real difference and distinction between the Jewish people and the non-Jewish world in Olam Hazeh. Kedichsiv, as the pasuk says in Sefer Devarim, Ki mi goy gadol asher lo Elokim, because which great nation has a God, krovim elav, that is close to it, v'chule, etc., b'chol korenu elav, and all that we call out to Hashem. So the Zera Shimshon brings that pasuk to say, what is our distinction? What is the Jewish people's uniqueness in this world? It is not, at least according to this second school of thought, it is not that we're receiving all kinds of schar for the mitzvahs that we do. That is not what makes us special in this world. What makes us special in this world is that we have a relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will listen and hear our prayers, or at least certainly the prayers of the tzaddikim, of the righteous people of each generation, and that provides protection and closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So let's pause here. The Zera Shimshon has answered his first question. He's about to pose another question, and I suspect the question that's coming up was really the main question that he wanted us to focus on, but he already posed a question and when he started, and he answered it. So let's just briefly recap. The Medrash Rabbah brought this analogy between Esav and the sun, and between Yaakov Avinu and the moon. And the Zera Shimshon says, it would seem, according to this piece in the Medrash Rabbah, that it could be used to prove that we are rewarded, Jews are rewarded for the mitzvahs that they do in this world. But that is not a simple subject. That's a huge machlokas in the Gemara. And so why does this Medrash Rabbah, why is it taking what seems to be a clear position on such a controversial question? And the Zera Shimshon answered, and he said, no. Even according to the other school of thought that says Jews do not receive mitzvahs in this world, schar mitzvos b'ha alma leka, there's no reward for mitzvahs in this world, they could also understand this piece in the Medrash Rabbah and be comfortable with it without a problem. Why? Because they would say that just like the moon, they would say what the Medrash Rabbah, they would interpret the Medrash Rabbah to be saying, just like the moon functions mainly and primarily at night, but is visible during the day, so too the Jewish people receive their reward for mitzvos in the next world, in Olam Haba, but are visible and recognizable and have a special role in this world as well. And he explained that in two different ways. One way was that even in the worst situations, even in the deepest, darkest exile, Jews are often promoted to high positions, and they become officers, and they're given honor, they're given and they're given wealth, and they're able to protect their community. So that's one way that Hashem gave them rachamim even in exile and gave them specialness. And so too, the prayers of Jewish people and the prayers of the tzaddikim are heard by Hashem in this world, and that's really what the Medrash Rabbah is talking about. It's not talking about this schar of mitzvos, the receiving of reward for doing mitzvos. It's talking about these other elements. So that's it. He answered his question, and in a sense, he could stop here, but he has more to share with us, of course, about this pasuk that we read. So let's continue. Va'adayin yesh ledaktek b'medrash zeh. And still, we need to analyze further this piece in the Medrash Rabbah. Ech sam hachoshech la'or. How did the Medrash Rabbah kind of conflate or mix together the concepts of night and day? V'himshil ha'olam hazeh l'yom v'ha'olam haba l'layla. And it compared this world today and the next world tonight. If we were to go back and look at the Medrash Rabbah, or just take a moment to think about it, the Medrash Rabbah said Esav is like the sun, because just like the sun is powerful during the day, Esav is only powerful during the day in this world, but he has nothing in the world to come. Well, in that analogy, in that comparison, this world is called day and the next world is called night. And the Zera Shimshon says that is problematic. That doesn't seem to make sense to call this world day and the next world night. After all, this is the poor, lowly, materialistic, physical world that is only a prose door, that's only an antechamber, the Olam Haba, to the great, lofty spiritual next world. So the next world should be called the day, and this world should be called the night. As the Zera Shimshon continues, V'adarabba, ibcha mistavra. And just the opposite is what makes sense. Just the opposite of what the Medrash Rabbah said is what it should have said. It should have compared this world to the night and the next world to the day. And in fact, this idea of comparing this world to the night and the next world today is what the Gemara in Pesachim says in the beginning of Maseches Pesachim. The Gemara over there quotes a pasuk from Tehillim. Ani amarti ach choshech. David HaMelech says, I said that even darkness will surround me, v'chulei. Ba'olam haba. And the Gemara comments, he was talking about an olam haba, shedome layom, which is compared to the day, v'chulei. Afilu ha'olam hazeh, shedome lalayla. But David HaMelech said, even in this world, which is compared to night and darkness, or ba'adani, there is light for me. Just to help us understand that Gemara, let's go off and explain it for a moment. In the pasuk in Tehillim, what David HaMelech is saying is that if he thought his sins were not going to be forgiven, and therefore he said, even in Olam Haba, where it should be light and beautiful, it's Olam Haba, it's going to be dark for me. It's going to be choshech for me because my sins aren't going to be forgiven. But then David said, now that Hashem is telling me that my sins have been forgiven, that they will be forgiven, they are being forgiven, now not only will Olam Haba, which is compared to daytime, be bright and light and beautiful, but even Olam Hazeh, even this world, which is compared to night and darkness, is full of light for me, is illuminated for me because I'm rejoicing that my sins have been forgiven. So in that Gemara, the way it understands the pasuk in Tehillim, it's absolutely clear that this world is compared to nighttime and the next world is compared to daytime. And that, of course, is the opposite of what the Medrash Rabbah said. Ube'emesh shahayofet toar pirish. The Zera Shimshon says, in truth, the Sefer Yofet Toar has explained this issue. She'inyan hamoshel hu, that the analogy that was made in the Medrash Rabbah is Lefi she'olam hazeh hu goloi v'nireh k'mo hayom v'hachama. It wasn't saying that this world is somehow more bright and jubilant and full of light than the next world. That's not what it was saying. It was saying that this world is an open world to us, and it's the world where we can readily see what's happening and going on. K'mo hayom v'hachama, just like the day and the sun. That's how we feel in this world. Olam haba, but in terms of as human beings, as mortals, when we think about Olam haba, the next world, utsafun v'nistar, it is hidden away and a secret and mysterious, kamo halayla, just like the night. Va'ayin sham, and look over there in that commentary to see it. So the Zera Shimshon says, I can see that the Yafet Torah has answered this question, and he has said that of course the Medrash Rabbah, if it was talking about the actual essence of Olam Hazeh and versus Olam Haba, it would call this world dark and the next world light. But that's not the point it's trying to make. The point it's trying to make, according to the Yafet Torah, according to this commentary that the Zera Shimshon is bringing down, is that from our perspective, not from the essence or not from Hashem's perspective, from our perspective, this is a world, our world, Olam Hazeh is a world where we feel comfortable, where we understand everything is transparent seemingly, and we can understand it and see it, make sense of it. However, when we talk about the next world, that's hidden in the shadows in the sense that there's lots of mystery, there's lots of opinions, we don't know what it's going to be like, we don't know how it operates. But here in this world, we feel like we have a pretty good idea about how this world operates. And even though the words of the Yafet Torah are appropriate, meaning they're correct, that's a good explanation. Nonetheless, we have to clarify, we have to make known and understand what compelled the author of the Medrash Rabbah to use the analogy that he used. In other words, the Zera Shimshon says, I get it. I get what the Yafet Torah said, and it's fine and it's good. And it helps us understand where the Medrash Rabbah was coming from. But why did the Medrash Rabbah choose to compare this world to light and day and the next world to night and darkness? Why did it choose to use that analogy? We understand that it's an acceptable analogy. It can be used. We have an explanation for it, but why? Why go in that direction? So the Zera Shimshon says there's more here than meets the eye. Continuing, v'yesh lomar, and we can say the kasha leila Baal HaMedrash, that the Baal HaMedrash, the author of the Medrash Rabbah, had a problem. Lama kosav kra es ha'ma'or hagadol lemimsheles hayom b'techila. Why does the pasuk talk about the great luminary, meaning of course the sun, ruling during the day first? V'achar kach es ha'ma'or hakaton lemimsheles halayla. And in the pasuk after it talks about the sun in the day, it talks about the moon, the smaller luminary, and the night. Why did it put things in that order? Why did the pasuk in Bereishit, our pasuk that we read in the very beginning, why did it talk about daytime first and nighttime second? The Adarabba, just the opposite. The pasuk should have talked about the moon, the smaller luminary, lighting up the night first, and then talk about the big luminary, the sun, lighting up the day. First talk about the night and then the day. Why? Because that is the appropriate order, how we discuss in Judaism, in the Torah, that's how we discuss days. As the pasuk says right there in Bereishit, Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker. It was evening and it was morning. Not only does it say it once, of course, it says it for each of the days of creation. It was evening and it was morning. So the Zera Shimshon says what really fundamentally, on the most basic level, bothered the author of the Medrash Rabbah was he looked at pasuk and he said, why is it talking about daytime and then nighttime? It should talk about nighttime and then daytime, because the Torah itself has taught us repeatedly in those psukim that we look at in the beginning of Bereishit, vayehi erev, vayehi voker. We look at the night first. A day starts with the night, and then it goes to the day. And of course, all we have to do is think about Shabbos and Yom Tov. We don't start with the morning and end the next morning. We start at night. When the night begins, that's when we start our Shabbos Friday night. That's when we start a Yom Tov. We start at night, Rosh Chodesh, whatever it is that we're looking at on the Jewish calendar, we start at night, and then we continue into the day. So why did this pasuk start talking about the day and the sun, and then afterwards talk about the night and the moon? Elavadai tzorich lomar, but definitely we need to say sheba bazel lefaresh lanu, that this piece in the Medrash Rabbah is coming to explain to us shemasha amar hakosav vayihiera vayihivoker, the fact that the Torah does in fact say repeatedly it was evening and it was morning, demashma shahayom holech achar halayla, that which implies clearly that the day follows the night. Eino la'olam kain. It's not always like that. Shaharei le'inyan hakedusha, because we find in terms of holy matters, we find in terms of the korbanos, ulehefech, that it's the opposite. Shahalayla holech achar hayom, that night is considered to follow the day. Kid'ashkechon be'achilas kodshim, as we find regarding the eating of korbanos, of certain korbanos, shene'echolim layom v'layla. The Torah tells us a korban can be eaten on the day it is brought and the following night. So you see, it views the day. It says you're going to eat it on this day, meaning the daytime and the nighttime. And in that sense, the night follows the day. Kid'chsiv, as the pasuk says. B'yom korbano ye'achel, on the day the sacrifice is offered, it should be eaten. Lo yaniach mimenu ad boker, and it should not be left over uneaten until the next morning. What does that mean? That means that a korban is brought. Let's imagine a korban is brought on a Wednesday. Wednesday morning, a korban is brought. That korban, and again, this doesn't apply to all korbanos, but this it applies to some korbanos. And so the Zera Shimshon says, when can it be eaten? That day and the following night. So Wednesday all during the day and Wednesday night you can eat it. It must be consumed or burnt by the time you get to the following morning, Thursday morning. Clearly here we're looking, the Torah is telling us to look at a day not as starting at night and going to the next day, but as starting in the morning, proceeding throughout the daylight hours and then continuing on through the nighttime. And that day ends the next morning. Wednesday ends, according to this perspective, as Wednesday night at right before sunrise, because for all those hours you could eat the korban, but then once the sun comes up on Thursday morning, you can no longer eat the korban. So the day of eating the korban has ended. V'chein b'limud Torah, and we see a similar idea regarding the study of Torah, that the day precedes the night. Amrinon, and we say in the Gemara in Maseches Eruvin, Anan poale diyamama anon. We, the Torah scholars, are day workers. We work all day studying Torah. That is our job. That's what we do during the day. Yasfinon biyamama, and if we need to borrow some time during the day, meaning if there's times during the day that we can't study Torah, we're pulled away from our Torah study, uparinon balayla, we can make it up at night. So what that Gemara is saying is that the Talmidei Chachamim viewed themselves as people who were like day laborers. All day long they needed to be in the Beis Medrash, they needed to be studying Torah. And if they missed time during the day, they could make it up they could make it up that night. So you see from that Gemara, the Zera Shimshon says that they're viewing the day as starting in the morning and going through the day and including that night, because otherwise, how could they make it up at night? That would be the start of the next day. If you're supposed to study Torah all day, well, when the daylight hours are over, you would think that's it. You missed out. You can't make anything up because the day's over. So, but the Gemara says, no, whatever we miss during the day, we can make up that night. And so the Zera Shimshon says, you see once again that when it comes to this particular area of life, the area of Torah study, we view it as the day preceding the night. V'chein mashma mipshat hakosuv, and this is also implied from the simple reading of the text. She'av ha'erev nikra yom, that even the nighttime part of the day is called yom, is called day. Midichsiv, from the fact that it's written, vayihi erev, vayihi boker, yom echad. It was evening and it was morning, the day one. Dehainu sheyom echad hu kolul miboker ume'erev. This clearly says that the first day included evening and daytime, nighttime and daytime. So even from the fact that the Torah calls a period of time, a 24-hour period of time, that includes nighttime and daytime, darkness and light, yom, day, we see that Lila can be called day, which supports the idea that the Zera Shimshon just developed, that sometimes in certain circumstances, we would view a day not as starting at night and continuing on to the next day, but rather starting in the morning and continuing and including the night that follows. And that's also called Yom. The night can also be called Yom, as he just showed us from the pasuk of Vayihi Erev Vayivoker, Yom Echad. Umegufe dekra, and from the pasuk itself, umegufe dekra didon, and from the text of the pasuk that we have been looking at about the sun and the moon that we started off with in the beginning, from that pasuk itself, muchach, it proves shahalavona yesh la shlita bayom uvalayla, that the moon has a role to play both during the day and at night. Kefi seder inyan hakadusha, just like we just showed that in certain holy matters, sanctified matters like korbanos, shahalayla holech achar hayom, that the night comes after the day. De korinon behachi, because we can read the pasuk this way, lememsheles hayom ve'es hamaor hakatom. We could, depending on where you put a comma in the pasuk, you could read the words of the pasuk to say it has rulership during the day and the moon, meaning the sun rules during the day and the moon does as well. We learn from this way of reading the pasuk that the moon also has a role to play during the day. And after it plays its role during the day, then it rules at night, which comes after the day. So, of course, the Zera Shimshon is not saying that that's the way we normally read the pasuk. The way we normally read the pasuk is the sun, the large luminary, rules during the day, and the moon rules at night, along with the kochavim, along with the stars. But the Zera Shimshon, of course, accurately is saying there's no commas in the Torah. It's not. We shouldn't be limited to only reading it that way. We could read it to say the sun rules during the day and the moon rules at night, along with the stars. So therefore, he finds at the very least a remez, a hint to his idea and his theme that he's developed, that sometimes we look at the day as starting with the morning and going to the daylight hours and then continuing with the night afterwards. So at this point, let's pause, because the Zera Shimshon has certainly, unless a person has been familiar and has encountered this idea before, has taught us something very radical and very novel, and that is that even though from the time that we're little children, we're taught in Judaism, the day starts at night and goes during the day. And it's very nice that little children learn Bereishit and they see Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, and that brings home the message very clearly. In Judaism, the day, and the Torah, the day starts at night and then it goes to the day. The little children learn about Shabbos and Yom Tov, and they experience how we start the Shabbos Friday night and it continues until Saturday. That's what all of our education and our life experience tells us. And the Zera Shimshon comes along and he says, absolutely true, but not the end of the story. Because sometimes the Torah looks at a day as starting in the morning, including the daytime and the following night, and that's considered a day. And he brought the example of Korbanos, and he brought the example of Talmud Torah, and he even was able to find a hint to this idea in the Psukim and Bereishit, in the pasuk specifically that we looked at. So now let's continue. Ume'ata shapir ka'amar. And from now that we understand this idea, it makes sense exactly what the Medrash Rabbah said. Now the Zera says, now we can truly understand the piece in the Medrash Rabbah that we started with what seems like a long time ago. Esav moneh lechama, Esav counts his year, bases his calendar on the sun. Shehi kfar gedola, because the sun is already referred to as the large luminary. Ve'ein lo lehiskadel od, and it is not able to grow anymore. The sun, in terms of this symbolism and this analogy to Esav, is already big, and it's as big as it's going to get, and that's just like Esav. Ve'af hu ein lo chelek ela bayom shel olam hazeh. And so too, Esav only shines during the day, which in the Medrash Rabbah means in this world. Shehu yom stam, which is a regular day, not a sanctified day. We're talking about the regular day that starts at night and then it goes to the day and then it's over. When we talk about the regular idea of a day, it starts at night and then it goes to the day. Once the day passes, ein lo hemshech klal. There's nothing else after that. It's starting a new day. It's starting the next day when you get to the night again. And that's just like Esav. He has his power in this world, and then it's over. It doesn't carry over at all to the next world. Ve'afal pishahu yom, and even though Esav is symbolized by the sun, who dome l'layla legabe ha'olam haba, he is compared to the night when it comes to the next world. That's why the Medrash Rabbah was referring to the next world at night. Because in terms of the point that the Medrash Rabbah wanted to make, it wanted to say Esav has all his power in this world and he shines like the sun in this world, but then he has nothing left over in the next world of Olam Haba. For him, it's just like the night. The Yaakov moneh l'levana, and Yaakov Avinu bases his calendar on the moon. Shehi katana, which is small. V'chol koton sofa lehiskadel. And anything in the world that's small, any living thing in the world that's small always grows. That's the nature of the world, that living things grow. So anything small grows. Yaakov Avinu is small, but that means there's growth. There's potential for growth. V'yesh lo shlita bayom uva laila. And there's a role for the moon to play both during the day and at night. The adarabba, and more than, and just the opposite, mavhik ora balayla yoser mi bayom. The moon's light shines more and is more visible to us at night than during the day. When he says adarabba, just the opposite, he means in contrast to the sun, which is so strong during the day and is not visible all at night, the moon is visible at night, but then the moon can be visible during the day, but then at night it really shines. V'af hu, and so too, Yaakov Avinu yesh lo chelek bayom ubalayla. Yaakov Avinu, and this is what the Medrash Rabbah was teaching us, has a role both in this world during the day and at night. Dahainu b'yom shel hakadusha. This is referring to a sanctified day, like regarding their korbanos, where the day comes first. Shemaschil me hayom. It begins during the day. U'mesayim, and it concludes balayla, at night. Lirmos, to hint to us, hemshech shlitaso she'af al pi shehu laila ba'olam hazeh hu yom la'olam haba u'ledevarim shebekedusha. The Medrash Rabbah was trying to show us that Yaakov Avinu's being compared to the moon is such an apt analogy. It's such a perfect comparison, because Yaakov Avinu starts off, the Jewish people, we start off in this world, which is being compared in the Medrash Rabbah to the day. Olam Hazeh is being compared and called the day. We start off in this world and we have a role to play, just like the moon is visible during the day. We're not invisible like the sun. We're visible even during the day. And then at night, which is the reference to Olam Haba, when Esav is invisible and there's no reward for him, that's when the moon shines the brightest. And that's when the Jewish people receive their full reward, their true spiritual reward, and their true luminescence comes forth and is visible. V'chein ksiv, and so too a pasuk in Zechariah it writes, V'hoya le'es erev yiyeh or. The psukim in this parak, this is parak Yudalad of Sefer Zechariah, are talking about either the time of Mashiach or possibly Olam Haba. And a pasuk says, then at the time of evening, it will be light. When evening comes, that's when there will be light. Oso hayom, when that day of the next world comes, oso haor, then the true light will come, Yomo Shel Yaakov, and it will be the true day, the true shining and dawning of the day of Yaakov Avinu and the Jewish people, Velo Yomo Shel Esav, and it will not be the day of Esav at all, because Esav has no role to play and it will be invisible when it comes to the time of the next world of Olam Haba. We're going to stop here. As you can see, the Zera Shimshon continues, and he actually discusses other ideas and goes off into some other points of his discussion. But I think we've certainly covered enough ground to be able to stop for tonight and to be able to look back and realize what a powerful and amazing piece in the Zera Shimshon this is. And I think one of the takeaways, there are so many things to take away and to go back and to think about and to review, but one of the really powerful takeaways is this comparison that the Zera Shimshon started with when he brought the Medrash Rabbah, the comparison of the non-Jewish world to the sun and the Jewish world to the moon. We would think that if any person was given the choice, they would say, oh, let's see, I could be the sun or the moon. Of course I want to be the sun. The sun is glorious. The sun is magnificent. The sun lights up the whole world. And the Medrash Rabbah is saying, yes, all of that is absolutely true, but the sun, it's only half of the story, because the sun only functions during the day. The sun has no role at night, whereas Yaakov Avinu, the moon, compared to the moon, has the role both in this world and is visible and nikar and distinctive. And the Zera Shimshon explained how in such important ways the Jewish people are distinctive in this world. However, the true shining and the true glory of the Jewish people is in the spiritual world and in the world of Mashiach and in the world of Olam Haba, where Esav has no role. Yasher koach to everyone who joined us tonight, and we look forward, God willing, to getting together and looking at the Zera Shimshon's comments on Parshas Noach next week.